Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to Evolving Consciousness. I'm your host Purushottam, and in today's video, we are going to discuss about the four key focuses of history makers. Yes, you heard that right. What are the four key focuses of people who create a tectonic shift in the world, who leave a dent in the universe? Now, to give credits to, I'm going to take this concept or this fundamental understanding from this phenomenal book called The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma, which is one of the recent publications of Robin Sharma. And if you have never heard of Robin Sharma is one of the top 5 leadership coaches in the world, in the sense that he is so influential that the top CEOs of the industry, they are his personal clients. So you can understand the caliber of this personality. Now, this 5 a.m. Club, the unique thing about this particular book is that it's highly implementable, because oftentimes when we read self-help literature, it feels good to read it, but the problem comes in the implementation. Now, this is one of those pragmatic books which will instantly give you impetus to implement. Now, if you read the title of this book, it's called The 5 a.m. Club. Now, it looks very evident. The title looks self-evident. It gives a message that we probably need to get up early. This book is all about the early risers, are the benefits of rising early. Yes, you're right, but it goes into a lot of granular details of different dimensions of our life. And the way this book is curated, it's in the form of a story with fictitious characters, and every protagonist has a role to play in giving us different messages in a lot of granular detail. I have taken up certain section of the book which I resonated with deeply. It talks about the four focuses of history makers. What are the top four focuses of history makers? People who can create a tectonic shift. If you're really interested in this kind of content which uplifts your soul, charges you up from within, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. There are a lot of videos which I've been recently publishing and uploading on a consistent basis. And if you enjoy this genre of content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this content with a lot of your close associations. Now, let's begin in the content of today's video. Now, if you think about it, right, now this is not some philosophical aspect. Research has proven that early risers are not only productive human beings, but they are healthy, both from a physical standpoint and an emotional standpoint. And if you look at the great titans of industry, whether it be Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg, in the material realm, even these people are known to be early risers. Jeff Bezos is also an example of an early riser. Now, this video is not about early rising, but this book, The 5 a.m. Club, it talks about this aspect that the earlier you rise, the more time you have for yourself. And the more time you have for yourself, the more different dimensions of your life you can work on. Now, let's get back to the focus of today's video. I have decided to make this video in two parts because otherwise it's going to get too lengthy. So, in the first part, we'll be talking about the two major points, two major focuses of history makers. And in the second part, we will be talking about the next two portions, next two focuses of history makers. Now, let's get into the crux of the subject. Number one, it talks about capitalize your IQ, capitalize your talents. Now, what does this mean? So, he says that most of us are victims of hypnosis, collective hypnosis, which suggests that geniuses are born, which suggests that people are naturally gifted with godly intelligence, with godly virtues. And he says that neurological research has debunked this myth. It's absolute crap, and it's not scientifically palpable anymore. There are a lot of books which talk about this aspect. One remarkable book which comes to my mind is Talent is Overrated by Jeff Cohen, who says that oftentimes the people who have been exceptional in their field of work, they were not born prodigies, they were not child prodigies, but they were people who were absolutely committed to excellence. And today, what the world looks and glorifies, it's essentially a lot of intensive labor which the world so casually, so easily ignores. They don't see the struggles behind that success. Now, recently I was going through this very short video of Manoj Vajpayee's interview with Aastak, and he talked about Shah Rukh Khan, right? Shah Rukh Khan needs no introduction. And he said that both of them were coming from the same school in New Delhi, and he had known SRK from a very long time, from his early days. And this one remarkable aspect of SRK was his amazing amount of commitment towards his goals, towards his life in general. And he is someone who can go to any extent. Manoj Vajpayee was saying that this is a person who won't hesitate to break his bones. He won't hesitate to take the extra mile to give his performance. Now, why did I bring up this example? This example is to sort of reiterate, it's sort of to refocus this power which each one of us has when we are absolutely committed, dedicated to hone our talents, to hone our skill sets. Because there is absolutely no person in this planet who is devoid of any talents. They can be as insignificant as having the capacity to do something slightly better than the others. But are we capitalizing on it? And Robin says that the number one reason we don't even think or tend to think in that direction is because of this collective hypnosis of society. He says that all of us think that people who are gifted, they are going to be virtuosos. I am not gifted. So we are always bombarded with the self-sabotaging belief systems. And our belief systems are sort of mirroring in our actions, in our habits. And he says that this is the most gross and also the most subtle form of self-sabotage, self-betrayal. And he says that the more you realize this fact, the more you are charged up that you have been fooling yourself, you have been lying yourself. And number one reason why we don't put work, right? We always come up with excuses. We say that there is a phenomenal concept which is floating around in psychological circles. It's called FOMO. FOMO is basically fear of missing out. Now, to achieve anything substantial, great in life, it requires a lot of sacrifice. It requires a lot of strenuous discipline. You need to let go of the time where your friends and your peer group are enjoying life, are they loafing around here and there, and you are focusing your entire energy in developing yourself. Sure, that's not an easy task, because you probably might think, what if I don't achieve? I'm putting so much effort, and what if I don't achieve that, and I probably will even miss out on these moments of enjoyment. Robin says that this particular belief system, that we won't be able to succeed, is basically coming from that self-sabotage belief that I am not good enough, I am not worthy enough. And that's the reason we don't fully capitalize our talents. And we always fall prey to the addiction of these things which give us instant happiness, instant pleasure. Whether it's roaming around here and there, whether it's just scrolling through social media. And one very important element here to understand and contemplate, the reason most of us are so much addicted to sensory pleasures. Now, what do I mean by sensory pleasures? It could be just going out here and there. It could be just engaging in some kind of eateries. Now, I'm not saying that this is something which needs to be completely avoided. That's not what I'm trying to focus on. But essentially, the most important source of most of our happiness, we think, is coming from sensory objects. I was going through this beautiful podcast which talked about the ladder of happiness, and it talked about the different levels of happiness. And you will be surprised and pleasantly amused to know that the pleasures which we experience through our senses, they come at the lowest level. In the ladder of happiness, this comes at the lowest level, sensory enjoyments. At the next level is intellectual happiness. Now, what is intellectual happiness? Intellectual happiness is when you are engaged in some intellectually stimulating activity. Suppose you are playing a game of chess and you sort of win that game of chess. Suppose you are someone who has graduated from a well-known institute. It's an intellectual achievement. So whenever you bring back that memory of that particular event, it gives you a sense of happiness. Now this is the next level of the happiness which we all human beings can experience. Now what is the more evolved level, even evolved than the intellectual level of happiness? Now this is the happiness which comes out of service. Just notice this, and even I have noticed this in my own life. When I do something for someone who is in need, right, whether it's feeding someone who is in need of satisfying their hunger, or someone who was in a dire need of a certain thing, and I became the vehicle of help, the satisfaction which we get through that activity, that is unparalleled. And the memory of that particular event stays back with you for your complete lifetime. You might enjoy in senses and you probably might forget after some time, right? But the impact you had, the need, the help which you provided, the help which you sort of became a vehicle to cater to the other person, that memory will always be there in your mind for a long period of time, probably even till the end of your life. Essentially, this is backed by scientific research. It says the third level, the more evolved level of happiness is the joy of service. And the fourth level of happiness, now that is a different zone altogether, that is what is called a spiritual ecstasy. The happiness which we get through our intense spiritual practices. Now that is a happiness of a complete different zone, and we'll not talk about it in this video. The reason I brought about this ladder of happiness is the reason why we are so much affected by FOMO symptoms, the fear of missing out, is because we think that if we engage in senses, if we sort of sacrifice our engagement in senses, we are missing out on something. But once we understand that we are not sacrificing our time in dedicating our time to sort of hone our skills, we are not missing out on something. Instead, we are actually aiming for something higher. And the happiness which we get through the things which are there in the higher spectrum of happiness, they are more fulfilling and they are more satisfying. Now this gives us this sort of reveals something which is not easily comprehensible by a lot of people. Probably you are not even aware of this fact. For us, happiness means just engaging in some entertainment activities, right? That is a sensory level of happiness, and that's the lowest level of happiness. Now, nobody is talking to go to the highest state of ecstasy, but even if you look at the intermediate steps, they probably are enough reason for someone to stop being more addicted to this FOMO syndrome. Hence, it's very important to capitalize our talents, to capitalize our innate capabilities. There is a beautiful quote by Alexander the Great. He said, and I quote, "I am not afraid of an army of lions. I am not afraid of an army of lions or an army of sheep, but I am afraid of an army of sheep led by a lion." Now, what does this mean? Now, this can be interpreted in so many different ways. We all become a victim to our self-sabotaging beliefs, and we come up with excuses as to why I am not focusing. We either blame something which happened in the past, or we sort of play down on ourselves. We think we are not capable of achieving certain things, and our behaviors are sort of reflective of that. Our subconscious beliefs, basically, if you look at it, our actions, the choices which we take throughout the day, they are nothing but a reflection of our subconscious beliefs. And deep down, if you think and believe that probably I won't be able to do it, so why even invest the effort? Then you will never take action, right? So it's as simple as saying that if there is a subconscious conviction deep within you that I probably won't benefit much even if I exercise for a very long time, I'm going to be in the same level of fitness, then you will never take in the effort to required to sort of do that activity, and you will always come up with excuses. The mind is very clever in fooling our own self, right? And this is where the power of intellect comes in. Because it's said beautifully that mind is a beautiful servant but a dangerous master. Oftentimes, the reason why we are not able to capitalize fully to our talents is the mind always tells us that probably this is not what you need. But you always need to understand this. What the mind is asking is not always what we need to succumb to. The mind might ask us to engage in things which are not good for us. But to receive that immediate gratification, you would probably engage in it. But this is where the role of intellect comes in. That discreting capacity is coming from the faculty called intellect. And once intellect starts giving dictations or commandments to the mind has to listen. And the more you do it, the more the neural circuits in the brain of that behavior will weaken. He says in this particular section, he says, every time the victim is rising in your consciousness, you need to become aware of that and immediately shift to heroism. Now, what does heroism mean? Whenever you feel complacent, whenever you feel like coasting around in life, ask yourself this important question, that what am I doing with my life? Am I doing the things which really deserve my attention, or am I just coasting in pleasures which are considered to be the lowest level of pleasures and happiness, right? So even if we are seeking happiness, let us seek the happiness which are at a higher plane, on a higher plane. Now, he was talking about this from a standpoint of honing our talents. And the reason I talked about the ladder of happiness is the number one reason why we think we shouldn't be excessively focused on our goals is because we think that we will lose out on some other layers of happiness. But this concept of ladders of happiness probably has debunked or probably has created a dent in your idea of happiness. Now let's go to the second key focuses of history makers. Now he says freedom from distraction is essential requirement. And he also says an addiction to distraction is death of your creative production. An addiction to distraction is the death of your creative production. Now this is a no-brainer, right? Everybody knows we need to be focused. Everybody knows that we have to be completely focused in our work. We shouldn't be distracted. Now let us talk about the neuroscience of distraction. Why do we get distracted? Now I had made a video on a titled video called Dose of Bliss, wherein I talked about this neurotransmitter called dopamine, which is sort of the pleasure-giving hormone. And our human brain gets used to a certain level of dopamine. And the reason why most of us love distractions is that dopamine is released. Now, one of the most common distraction in today's day, and it won't be an overstatement to call it an intoxication. Intoxication need not necessarily be alcohol, drugs, or sex. Intoxication, which is more prevalent in today's times, is the intoxication of mindlessly scrolling on social media. You'll be surprised to know that social media has become such a chaotic source of addiction that it is also rewiring our subconscious beliefs. We probably are not even aware, but most of us are unconsciously comparing ourselves with the social media pages. We always start comparison, and we see that the people are having a beautiful time, but we don't realize that people who post on social medias and even the celebrities, right, so-called known celebrities, they are the people who are suffering from chronic depression. So don't ever judge a book by its cover. You don't know the kind of shit the person is going through. There was a case of a famous celebrity who was known to travel to exotic places. He used to have the brand new cars, luxurious cars, and months later, news comes out in the media that the person has committed suicide. So it's very foolish to look at social media and feel either elevated or sad by comparing your metrics with someone else's whom you know nothing about. It's beautifully said that our best picture is our social media profile photos, and our real picture is which is there in our unique identification card, right? The Aadhaar card and the PAN card. So it's a foolish premise. Now coming back to this distraction element. Now distraction gives us pleasure. That's why we engage in it. But what if I told you, I talked about the second level of happiness, right? The intellectual engagement. There is a state called the state of flow, which is almost like a state of bliss. So when you are intensely concentrated on a certain activity, the fun part is dopamine is released even then. So why are we sort of compromising on the low class level of dopamine? Because when you endlessly scroll on social media, you are giving your brain a dose of dopamine which is coming from a low class source. And it is said the more you practice distraction, better you become at distraction. And nobody wants to get better at distraction, right? Hence, it's very important to have absolute freedom from distraction. Robin also says that there's always a conflict in the human brain. He says that there are two primitive parts of the human brain. One is the amygdala or the limbic system. Now, amygdala is a part of the human brain which is like an almond-shaped almond-shaped structure, which is responsible for our fear and flight mechanism, the fight and flight mechanism. And it's also the part in the human brain which is responsible for the negativity bias. Now this served immensely back in our early evolution stages, but it doesn't serve us now. Now you might be thinking, how is freedom from distraction related to amygdala? Now the prefrontal cortex of the human brain is responsible for all the higher awareness, all the intellectual stimulation. This comes from the prefrontal cortex. Now the primitive brain or the limbic system or the amygdala is always in constant fight with the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the storehouse of intellectual stimulation, is a storehouse of action-taking mindset, is also the storehouse of boundless creativity. Now when there is a constant fight between the primitive brain and the prefrontal cortex, most of the time the amygdala wins. And the reason why we sort of get distracted is because there are two reasons to it. Number one, we want that cheap source of dopamine, and we get that cheap source of dopamine, we feel good. Everyone wants to feel good, right? So we feel good through that. But what we are essentially neglecting is we are sabotaging that focus, that element of focus which we sort of wasted in scrolling through that social media. Hence, it's very important completely cut down all models of distraction. Now, a very powerful, and probably this might be viewed as a pessimistic way to eliminate distraction, but this is something which I have read and I thought it to be very profound and powerful. Now, we all come with an expiry date, right? Now, this is not philosophy. Everyone knows for a fact that there will come a date when we probably need to vanish. And there will come a time where this existence won't be real to us. Now, the reason why contemplating death is a powerful tool which can be used to cut out all the nonsense from your life. Because when you understand this, you won't chase things which are not worth your attention. Because you will have a clear understanding as to which is important in your life. Steve Jobs, one of the legendary human beings who has a tremendous influence in my life, he always asked himself this question: if today was the last day of my life, what would the choice I take? Whenever he was given two options, what would the choice you take if today was the last day, was his defining question to maneuver over choices. Now, when we think about this aspect, we automatically throw down all the frivolous distractions and we become absolutely focused on what really matters to us. It doesn't matter anymore what others think about you. What really matters is how are you conducting yourself throughout the day. Are you practicing distraction? Are you practicing focus? Because what you practice grows. And unconsciously, most of us are practicing distraction because we want the cheap thrill of dopamine. But the higher level of dopamine is when you are absolutely focused in your activity. I hope my today's video brought about light on the first two key focuses of history makers, which is talked about in this phenomenal book, the 5 AM Club. We'll talk about the next two aspects, the next two key focuses of people who create a tectonic shift in the world. Thank you so much for your time on my video, and if you really loved the video, don't forget to share my video with a couple of your friends and do make this wisdom viral, because this information is something which is worth sharing, and anyone from any walk of life can tremendously benefit from this. Thank you so much, and I'll meet you in the next video.